Council of Nerds.
Magic, potions, owls, and a strange young boy with the worst aunt and uncle in the world. You got it right. We're talking about Harry Potter today. As always, my name is Brian. I'm joined by my co-hosts Logan and Dan today. We're going to be talking about, as I said, Harry Potter. Redundancy is always important. For the next 7 episodes, we're going to be going over each of the Harry Potter books and movies in turn and just talk about our favorite moments from those movies and books and our impressions. And we want to go a little bit deeper into them individually. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next little while. So for the first one, as people know, is the Sorcerer Stone or Philosopher Stone, depending on, your geographical location. Let's just get started. For me, this kind of eventually started a lot of my nerdiness, but wasn't exactly the best impression on me as a movie. And I didn't even read the books till I was in my 20s. I know, shameful.
Oh my gosh.
Shame.
Brian, shame.
Also, same.
Hey, I'm not alone. Wow. But it's definitely interesting to look into this book/movie and all the references that come up later on in the series and how much was put up front for us to build off of in the future. So for the first topic of discussion, did you guys like it or did you not? Like when you first saw the movie or when you first read the book, like were you grabbed right away or was it like me where I was like, okay, cool, thanks for making me go see this movie, Mom. I'm going to go watch Transformers or whatever.
I know for me, I was grabbed right away, but I have a different experience with it from you guys. I think I read the books in elementary school, and actually growing up, my mom, she would read the books to us every night as we were going to sleep. We'd all gather in her room. She'd read them. She'd do all her voices and stuff. And then for the movies, she'd take us out of school early on the day they came out so we could go see them. And so I've always just had I've always just had this fascination with Harry Potter because I'm like, it got me out of school. It's what I went to sleep as a kid. And so, it's cool. But I think no matter when you become a fan of Harry Potter, it's cool. If you don't become a fan of Harry Potter, that's
You're weird.
Yeah, everyone's entitled to their opinion, even if you're wrong.
Well,
Even if you're wrong.
it's true.
Logan, what were
Yeah,
your
I don't
impressions?
I don't really remember, honestly. I mean, I do, but I don't. I remember seeing it for the first time. And I believe I loved it. I think because it came out in the fall time, and my birthday's in the fall. And so I think that birthday I got all those original Harry Potter action figures and stuff, which were super cool. I remember I got the troll, I got Harry, I got Malfoy, I got a bunch, I got everyone.
Yeah.
So I loved it. I thought I loved it, and I think it was cool just because that wasn't my introduction to a nerdy thing. I think I saw Lord of the Rings first. But Harry Potter opened up a more relatable world for me because, I was 6 or something like that, 6 years old. So, I wasn't 11, but I was still, it was more relatable to get into Harry Potter as a normal kid in a normal world where there's just this other wizarding world. Sure. So I think that's why, I liked that so much more. It was more fun. I never read the books as a kid. My mom didn't read me the books. I just never had a desire. I just didn't like reading that much. I still kind of don't. And I actually read it for the first time 3 years ago. But I listened to it over audiobook because it's more fun.
I was going to say, honesty moment, I've never actually read them. I've listened to the dulcet tones of Jim Dale.
Yep.
Amazing man. But
I read the last chapter of the last book once.
This one time.
Just to know how it ends.
Yeah, I was like, I want to know the difference between the movie and the book, so I read the last chapter. So.
Well, there you go. Well, Dan, apparently you're the only one with a good mom. Just kidding, Mom, if you listen to this. Nope, just
My
kidding.
mom's a saint.
Lovely people all the way around. But Dan, I guess this is going to be a more poignant question for you because I wasn't able to do this until after I listened to the books and rewatched the movies. But going from a kid who listened to the books all the time and then you finally watched the movie, what moment for you in the movie seemed to be like, that's exactly what I thought of when I heard the books? Like, do you have a scene that like, oh, that's perfect, that's exactly what I thought of as a kid, or did you have that experience at all?
It's hard looking back and trying to remember like how little 6, 7, whatever, however old I was, me pictured the Harry Potter movies. But I think something that like I can remember, I don't remember specifics, but I remember I would watch the movie, especially the first one when I was little, and I was never really disappointed in it. Because, you always imagine this magical world, and I think the movie did a great job of like capturing the atmosphere of that. My biggest gripe, this is across all the Harry Potter movies, is that they didn't include Peeves, because little 6-year-old me, there's this poltergeist running around pulling pranks on everyone. I was like, yeah, he's my hero, he's my favorite one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just always loved the movies. They've always made an impression. I think, actually, I think my favorite thing was Hagrid, seeing this guy who's supposed to be twice the height of everyone else, and then on film they somehow make it happen, and it looks normal, especially for a movie that was made in the early 2000s. Like, it doesn't look weird, it doesn't look janky, like it looks like, oh, that guy's actually 12 feet tall or something.
Yeah.
I think that's good to point out too. Like, that movie came out a long time ago, but it still totally holds up. You know what I mean? Like that, even though it's has its differences from the books, and like it's early 2000s, so like getting some of like the CGI stuff going or whatever, it was all new, but it totally holds up. And I think that's why I think that movie is so good, is because, I mean, to this day, even as an adult, I like the later movies and stuff, but that first one is just so good. It's like that magical moment of Harry becoming a wizard and learning about all the wizarding stuff and getting into it. I think that's super fun.
Yeah, I think the book does. Of course, the movie doesn't have as much time to go into some of this stuff, but the book does a fantastic job at explaining even the smallest facets, like how their currency works. Like,
Yeah.
like, okay, thanks for 17 sickles for a galleon, I guess. That's
Yeah.
cool. Like, I don't need to know that, but thanks for letting me know. It's interesting because J.K. Rowling, when she was trying to get just the first book published, she had to go to like tons of different places to try to get it published, and she had people telling her that this would never be successful, this would never be anything, and now she's I think she's the wealthiest author ever now.
She's richer than the Queen of England.
Wow.
Is she really?
That's
yeah,
pretty
I
impressive.
read that once.
And I think if it wasn't for her tenacity to get that done and to keep going and never giving up on her thing, I think that ends up bleeding into some of the work with the books and stuff of, never giving up on things and Harry keeping going forward. And a lot of characters that just persevere through a lot of different things that happen in the books. But, well, Dan, you may not have remembered what your kid self felt like, but what about your adult self? Or what did all of us, as a question for all of us, favorite scene from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone?
I gotta think about that one.
I've known my favorite scene. This is like something recently, because it's definitely not the same as it was when I was a kid. I think, strangely, one of my favorite people in the first book is Neville Longbottom. As a kid, I thought, this guy's so annoying, just let him go to the Chamber of Secrets, let him do this. Like, why are you, or not Chamber of Secrets, sorry, let him go into find the Sorcerer's Stone, whatever, like that gauntlet is called. Let him do that, and he blocks him. And I think my favorite scene, now at least, is when it gets to the end of the movie and Dumbledore's awarding points, and he's like, Harry, you're amazing, here's 1,000,000 points. Harry, or Hermione, you're amazing, here's 1,000,000 points. Ron, good job, here's 20 points. And then he's like, he goes on to Neville, and he's talking about, how it takes courage to stand up to people, it takes more courage to stand up to your friends. And that part like always hits me like really really hard because I'm like, that's really true. Like even though Harry, Hermione, and Ron did all this stuff, like they were fighting someone who's black and white, an evil person. Meanwhile, Neville is like, this is right, but these are people who are like my friends, air quotes. They didn't treat him like a friend, but he stood up to them.
Are you gonna cry?
No, maybe. No, I have in the
You
past
relate
though
to
at that
Neville.
scene. Yeah, I do. I've cried in the past to that scene. It's just so awesome.
You have quote unquote friends.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's awesome. I think it's interesting that your point of view changes as you get older. It's like when you're a kid, you think, oh, that part with the troll was cool because there's a troll, or when the dragon hiccuped and lit Hagrid's beard on fire, like cool. But I think it's the same for me. I think the reason I like this particular scene is because for me, I was able to go listen to the books and then come back and rewatch it, trying from the perspective of how did this translate from the books. But the moment that the kids are on the boats and they finally get like that shot of Hogwarts, that like for me just set up everything. It was, and I you could feel it for the characters as well. It's like, hey, you're not in Kansas anymore. It's like you are part of this world now. You are no longer wherever you were before. Nothing matters. What matters now is you're here in this amazing place. And I think in a sense that's the jumping point for most of the movies to transport you to a happier time, not only for Harry but for a lot of the characters. Speaking of Neville in particular, he's got an overbearing mother or grandmother and two parents that are not there. We'll get into that in a later episode. But he's got a lot of things that he struggles with at home, I'm sure, things that none of us could really fathom. And for him, he's able to escape. And yeah, he's still made fun of, and he's still scared of Professor Snape and all these other little quirky things about Neville. But he also has his friends that I think if it wasn't for that scene that Dan had talked about where he stands up to them at the end of the first movie, I don't think they would have respected him as much as they came to in the end. Yeah. And I think that was an interesting jumping point for him. I have a backup favorite scene, but I won't talk about that one. But Logan, what was yours?
Oh, well, first I want to say, like, along with yours, like the boat scene of them going into Hogwarts, and like how important that is for those characters and stuff. Like, I would say it's pretty important for the audience too. I think as a kid and even now when I watch that movie and it's that first moment of them seeing Hogwarts, like seeing the castle and going in on the boats, it's kind of like, they're going into this new world, but like so is the audience. And I think it's just kind of cool, it brings the audience with these students into the school for the first time. It's pretty magical. But for me, my favorite scene, and I honestly don't remember my favorite scene as a kid, but as an adult, my favorite scene is when Harry gets his wand at Ollivander's. And I think the reason I love that scene so much is just Ollivander. Like, him alone is just such a cool character to me. I think, like, wand lore and wands and, like, that whole aspect of this wizarding world is super cool to me. And then, they try those first two wands and they don't work out. And, Harry's completely new to this. And I love when he's like, well, give it a wave. Like, right. He's like, yeah, like Harry would know, he's grown up. But at the same time, it's like people don't know that. They don't know he's been suppressed by all these muggles his whole life and stuff. He doesn't know anything about it. But the speech that Ollivander gives after Harry gets his wand about how, the phoenix feather that resides in his wand is the same as he who must not be named. I think that's really cool. I think that whole speech, it gives me the chills. Mm-hmm. It's just a fun little thing that's just like totally setting up Harry's destiny in some way, like it's almost weird. When I watched the movie last night, and when he does that, I was like, it's kind of weird that Ollivander seems to know like more about Harry's destiny and Harry's life like his future life than anyone at that moment. Like that phoenix feather that resides in the wand told Ollivander so much. I just think it's just such like a important moment for everything. I think it's overlooked though. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it seems like, oh yeah, he's getting his wand, it's super cool. Little speech about how, the core of the wands are the same. But I feel like it's way more important than people think, and I think that's why I love it. I love how important that is and how just cool.
That scene, spoiler alert, that was my backup favorite scene. I think that scene does a lot of things for the future continuity of what Harry Potter is. It gives Harry his first tangible experience of him being special.
Right.
Like, that's the first moment where he went, wow, I am not that kid that lives under a staircase.
I'm special.
And then from a cinematics point of view, it also showed the acting potential that was in the cast. Like, that little monologue is delivered so amazingly that no matter how many times I watch it, like Logan said, I get the chills. Just him talking about it, I'm playing it in my head and I get the chills. Like,
yeah,
it's incredible.
Well, and then like when you go to Harry Potter World, in Universal Studios, and you go to Ollivander's and you do that little the thing with the actor there, who usually ends up choosing a little kid, even though you want to do it, and that's cool. It's fine. I wasn't hurt. But like, you know what I mean? Like, even just being there, even though I wasn't chosen and stuff, like, it was still so cool. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I Harry Potter? Because like, this is cool. Like you just relate so much to the movies, and I love that. It's super fun.
Not to diverge from Harry Potter, but I feel like that's the difference for me between Harry Potter Land and Star Wars Land at Disneyland, is that for me, when I went there wasn't something that made me feel like I was super a part of Star Wars. Like, it was cool, and I liked a lot of the stuff, but the stuff at Harry Potter Land in Universal, in Hogsmeade Village, like, I could point that stuff out, and I was like, I'm there. The music is playing the whole time. There's little interactive things you can do throughout the entire time you're there, and that aspect of it made me feel like I was finally a part of this world that I've been dying to be a part of for so long.
I will say, hold on, sorry. I will say with that though, like, I think the main reason for that is because I feel like Harry Potter's more relatable. Like, it's on our planet. It's, humans for the most part. It's just humans, and they dress like us in some way, and like the movies really brought that for us, right? They dress like normal people. Well, they dress like hipsters, and they throw on their robes every once in a while. But like, going to Hogsmeade and stuff, they're just normal wizard people. And so like going to Harry Potter World, you just kind of feel like you're a part of it because you basically already are one of them. But at Star Wars Land, I mean, I've never been there, but everything's so different. You're supposed to be out of this world, out of this galaxy and everything. And so it's like I would say it's totally different. I mean, I haven't been, but I can see where you're coming from on that one.
Sure. Well, this brings me to two interesting fan theories. Here we go. And if you guys have any, if we get to a talking point that makes you think of a fan theory that you know or you've thought of or you've heard of in the past, please stop me at any time. The first one is the mental break theory. Are you guys familiar with this one?
No.
I might be.
So the theory goes is that Harry was abused and neglected and all of that to the point where he had a psychotic break and he imagined the entire world.
He's psycho. That's the theory.
Right.
Basically,
Basically, he's in a psych ward and he's just imagining that he's this awesome wizard. So that
is he a psycho? Like, in the real time, he's a psycho. Is he a kid or is he an adult imagining all this?
Same age.
And he's imagining to be a kid.
Same age. It's just as a result of the abuse and neglect, he has a psychotic break, and then he becomes the boy who lived. Like, he had to have something, and so his brain just protected him, gave him this shell.
It's actually super funny.
Like, it's super sad. Like, if you think about that.
Yeah, but I'm laughing.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that one before, but
I've never heard that. That's
let me counter that, you guys.
Ooh.
You guys ever
Yes.
think about how Petunia ended up so different from her sister? She's super angry all the time. All the Dursleys are just horrible, rude people,
yeah.
right?
Right.
If you think about it, I'm jumping ahead a few books, but I promise it ties in.
Spoiler.
If you
alert.
think about it, yeah, spoiler alert, last book, they got a Horcrux, right? And they got a little pendant. You know what happens to Ron, right?
Right.
He goes kind of crazy. He goes from like this really nice dude who likes candy, who likes frogs, who, plays sports, has fun, into this super
Rats.
horrible douchebag because he had a Horcrux living with him.
Right.
And the theory is that Harry's a Horcrux too, and that's why the Dursleys are horrible people, because Horcruxes influence people around them. And so they were influenced by the part of Voldemort's soul that lived within Harry to be horrible, evil people.
Yeah. I've heard that one. I like that one actually a lot. Because in some ways it humanizes the Dursleys for me and gives them, again, it gives them an excuse, but like at the same time I want them to have one because I don't want them to think they're that evil.
Yeah, because like for me, like, why are they so mean? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point? Why are you so mean to an 11-year-old kid
Right.
for no reason? And it's like, when he was a baby, were you like bullying him as a baby? Like, I'm not gonna feed him milk today. Only Dudley gets your portion. That's why he's so fat when he's older. But like, I just never got that. So that would be a good theory because they're so mean for no reason.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like anyone. What surprises me through the continuity of Harry Potter is that no one notices the abuse of Harry, like in the neighborhood. And I get it. It's like,
Yeah.
ignore your neighbors. It doesn't happen. It happens in the real world all the time where people ignore things like that. But that's always kind of bugged me. It's like, come on. Like, come on. You know something weird's happening. There's a kid you see like every once in a while, and he looks very different than everybody else in the family. Well, look at that. We had a counterpoint. I have one other fan theory. This one actually is very interesting to me.
I have one too, so maybe it's the same one, but I
All right,
remember
well, here, you go
one
with
that's
yours.
pretty
I've already
cool.
said one, so you go ahead.
Okay. So the one I heard, I don't know too much about it. I've just read like, a surface level of it. And this is like, it's not really within the movies kind of. I guess it's kind of the same thing as yours, but it's that George is the one that, spoiler alert, George is the one that continues on in life, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so George, the theory is that George grows up to be Willy Wonka.
Yes, not the one I was thinking of, but I love this one.
Okay, this theory is so cool to me. So, because like the theory is, 'cause if you've seen at least the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, with what's that guy's name, Gene Wilder.
Yep.
From, is that the 70s?
Yeah,
Yeah, so like Willy Wonka in that movie, he's always like hard of hearing. His office, everything is like in half. Like everything, like if you hit, for example, if he had like a lamp, it would be just half of a lamp, but it would still work. He has, that factory's totally magical. The stuff he's doing in there is in a way magical. He keeps everything secret. Just like all these things, and it relates to like everything being half in his office is because Fred died, and so it's like half of George is gone in a way. It's like half of him is gone, and so everything in his office is half. And he's missing his ear, which is also like a half being gone, but also his hard of hearing. And so I think that theory is really. I don't know if you know more about it, Brian, but I think that theory is pretty.
Part
funny.
of it is he's a prankster, and literally the
yeah.
entire operation of bringing these kids in, he ends up pulling pranks on every single one of them. Like,
Right.
one kid gets sucked up into a tube of chocolate. That's not cool, but it's something that George would think was funny. Like,
Yeah.
I've also heard that the Oompa Loompas are actually just goblins that he's transfigured and has gotten them to work for him. And it goes kind of in depth. It's sad if you think about it that he feels like he's
It's really sad.
so lost, that he's missed so much of himself, that he can't have a whole of anything. That everything
Yeah.
he owns has to be in halved.
But I mean, that's how twins work. I'm not a twin. Two of my brothers they're twins. They're identical twins, and like, that's how they work. Like twins are weird. I'll say it. I know he listens to the
not
podcast and he'll
afraid.
get mad, but I mean, like, they're weird. Like the way I don't want to say communicate, but in a way, yeah, the way they communicate is weird. It's
With
almost
their-
creepy.
They're twin antennas that they just.
Yeah, and they're and then also just like the bond between twins is just so crazy. It's really intense, and so it's understandable. Like if Fred, you see it in the movie too. Like when he loses his brother, it's terrifyingly sad.
Devastating, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing. I won't get into this too much, but that's one thing I think
Right.
that the last movie didn't handle as much is how devastating that was.
Yeah, that should have been handled differently.
But
Anyway.
for the last fan theory that I think we'll go over, and then we'll move on to another subject. Going back to the boat scene, we know in subsequent years going forward that all of the students are transported to the school via the carriages that we later find out in book 5 that are pulled by
Yes.
Thestrals, correct?
It is book
Mhm.
5, yes.
So it stands to reason somewhat that if every other year the students are transported by a creature to the castle, that in their first year they're transported by a creature as well. If you think about it, all Hagrid does is he gets into the head boat and he says forward. Now, what we know about Hagrid is he doesn't have a lot of magical ability. He wouldn't have the magical prowess or the permission at that point to propel all those boats across the lake. But there is a particular creature that is only mentioned in the books that lives in the lake that would have the capacity to bring the boats across that Hagrid could have trained to transport the students. Any guesses?
I forgot the name of the creature.
Giant squid?
The giant squid. If you think about it, I think it's in book 4. Colin Creevy's younger brother, can't remember his name, falls out of the boat in his first year as he's coming across. And the tentacle of the giant squid immediately puts him back in the boat. Now, that could just be crazy random happenstance. Or, if you go with the theory, the squid's already there, and he's just putting the kid back in the boat, and he pulls it along like he was doing the whole other time. It's something that, what's interesting is that the squid is one of the first things that J.K. Rowling ever came up with. There's a concept book that was sold at an auction, and one of the first things that she ever wrote up was that there was a giant squid in the lake next to Hogwarts. And so it seemed like it was something that was important to her, and then it just kind of never came to much. Like, kids just kind of fed it bread in random moments in the book and stuff like that. But I thought it was a very interesting theory of these students are always transported by magical creatures that you can't see. Unless it's certain circumstances. Thestrals, unless you've seen the dead, you can't see them. And the squid at night, hard to see probably under the water. I thought it was an interesting theory. When I first heard it, I was a bit floored, but I thought it was cool.
That also, for me, raises the question, why? Like, why are they always brought to school by these creatures that they can't see? Why does that matter? Why can't they see them all the time? You know what I mean?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe there's an aspect of trust for the students. If you think about it, you're being transported by things that you can't see, and then there's magic. But on your first year, you have very little exposure to magic for some of the students. Maybe it's a trust thing. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
I think maybe because Hagrid, he's not allowed to practice magic, right? I mean, he does it anyway throughout the books, but not really to an extent. And so, I feel like these magical creatures are we know Hagrid had that obsession when he was younger, but especially since losing his wand, these magical creatures are the only way that he can legally influence with magic now is through Fluffy the three-headed dog, or through dragons, or through Thestrals, or through the What were we just talking about?
Giant
Giant squid. There we go. Oh my gosh. It's like, those are his only like real ties of influence with the wizarding world, and so like he likes to use those a lot because, I mean, we can see, you know, especially with Filch too, him being, spoiler alert, you know, not the most magically gifted at all. Like he's willing to take a crap job at the school where all he does is clean up after these magical incidents, have magic rubbed in his face just so he can be surrounded by magic. And so I think it's like Hagrid's way to like still be a part of the world is to use these animals, these magical creatures, to bring the kids into school. For some of them, it's their first introduction, you know, to magic. Like Harry, you know, he'd done a little bit of magic, but like his first real thing was like being pulled across the boat, you know, in this magical way. So those are my thoughts. A lot more than I thought I was going to share when I started talking, but
All right. Well, there goes the fan theories for the episode.
That's cool.
I don't know. I can't necessarily remember where I've heard most of them. I didn't come up with any of them on my own. So if anyone out there thinks that I'm a genius, I'm not.
I can vouch for that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we know.
Thank you. All right. Let's move on to the next point I have here. I want to know what your guys' favorite line, either from the book, if it's only in the book, or that was shared in the movies. I know, at least for the first two movies, the movies follow pretty close to the lines in the book, and then it deviates a little bit further on with those other movies. But Logan, what's your favorite line from the Sorcerer / Philosopher's Stone?
It's weird. I don't remember many lines from the books. I remember, like, okay, it depends on the book. This book, I don't remember any lines specifically from the book. But movie, I would say... Do we have to do it in a British accent?
Oh.
I'll do it in a British accent. I'm going to do it in a British accent. I like the... it's Ronald Bilius Weasley's line.
Nice middle name.
Thank you. And it goes, "Not me, not Hermione, you." And I think that's funny.
You just think it's funny? It's like...
I just think it's funny. I think it's just like, I don't know, I have a hard time taking 11-year-old kids serious sometimes. And that's like a super serious situation. And this little kid, I just feel like they're way too mature for 11-year-olds. Maybe that's because I'm super immature as a 25-year-old. But I would just think, you know, he would be like, "No, Harry, you need to go." Right. But instead he's like, "Not me, not Hermione, you." And he's like riding this stone horse, and I just think that's funny.
Right.
I don't know. I don't. That's the one that's just always stuck out to me. All those like dumb lines, you know, like just, you know, Neville's lines are always funny to me. He's like one-liners, and even especially in the first one, Hermione's one-liners are golden. But that one sticks out the most.
That's true.
Yeah.
For me, I have a few, so I might say one or two. We've kind of covered one that I love the whole monologue that Ollivander goes over. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We've covered that. But there's two lines that one I find hilarious and one I think is really interesting for the story itself. But the one I find hilarious is when McGonagall gives Harry and Ron 5 points for defeating the troll. Which, by the way, you should get more than 5 points each when you just basically told them that, like, you probably should have died, but here's 5 points. Like, what?
I don't care if it's luck. Give
Right.
them the points.
And I love when she just goes, "For sheer dumb luck." And she, like, just the way she says it is so
That was
funny.
so good. You would do a great McGonagall.
It was so funny. That has always, in the way that she accents the K on the end of luck, it's just, it's amazing. It's very much like McGonagall. And that's always made me laugh.
That line, that's funny that you point out how she says it, because for some reason every time she says that line, when was the last time you guys saw the Disney's animated Robin Hood with all the animals?
Oh
I
my
watched it like
gosh.
maybe 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so
watched
you
it
know the
Long time.
chicken You know the chicken though,
Yeah.
Maid Marian's chicken, dude. That every time McGonagall says that line, I instantly think of the chicken because that's how she talks all the time, and I don't know, that's like the weirdest
That is
connection.
such a
but
strange reference, but I love it.
Yeah.
The other one that I love, the other line that I love is, "Dear Alan Rickman, may you rest in peace." Pour one out for the
Rip.
homie. When your first introduction to him speaking, and he walks in, he says, "There will be no foolish wand waving or silly incantations in this class," and you're like, okay, this guy's not messing around. Like, you instantly know that this guy means business. And then what I think is interesting is subsequently he starts going on about how cool potions are, which I'm gonna be honest, if I was going to wizarding school, probably would be the last thing that I would consider to be an interesting subject. It's not a judgment call on anybody. It's just I can make a potion on a stove as a muggle. It's called poison. Like, it's not like, come on. But
That's true.
Harry's trying to take notes. Like, he's taking notes of what Snape says. He gives the initial reaction of Harry to Snape is that Harry thinks, I should respect this man. He's a teacher. I should listen to what he has to say. I should take down all these notes. It sounds important. And he gets in trouble for that. And I think Snape, with his history with Harry's father, spoiler alert, and mother, has just automatically written this kid off, that he's going to be a pain. He's going to be his father that he didn't get along with. And so instead of, what could have been an entire school history of Harry liking potions, he hates it instantly because Snape just comes out the gate with his fists raised. And I think it's interesting that Harry's initial reaction to potions is, I want to learn. I'm going to take notes. And then he gets just gutted by Professor Snape. So I think that's kind of an interesting turning point and the starting point, really, of their relationship. But I think it ruins Harry for potions for the rest of his career in school.
He sucked at potions, didn't he?
Well, if you had someone you hated teaching your class, I remember hating teachers in high school. I never did good in the classes of the teachers I didn't like.
That's true.
I just didn't even want to go to class. So
But I mean, Harry, do you think Harry would have chosen a different route career-wise if he liked potions?
No, I don't think so. But I think he would have done better on his owl. I think he might have.
That's true.
I think he might have tried harder in the class itself and learned more, so that by the time he gets to book 6, he's not just using Snape's spoiler alert, Snape's notes to get by. Right. I think we should. How many times have we said spoiler alert in this episode?
We're going to be saying a lot of spoilers in the next 7 episodes, except for the 7th episode, actually. That one won't be much of a spoiler.
We'll know everything at that
That's
point.
true.
So.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, it's on to you, my friend. Favorite line?
So my favorite line, I already said it. It's the one, a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much stand up to our friends. So I'm not going to reuse that one. But I've been listening to the audiobooks during my job. I drive around a lot, so I have a lot of time to listen to audiobooks. And every time I listen to the books, I'm always blown away by how funny Fred and George are. Like, they're funny in the movies, but like in the books, they're just like the perfect amount of wit and everything. And so
about blowing up a toilet or something.
They do, yeah. That's actually one of my favorite lines. But I think my favorite one from them I think it's left out of the movie. Maybe it's in like an extended edition. But it's Christmas. They all get their sweaters. Harry puts his on. Ron doesn't want to put his on. And in walks Fred and George. And they're like, "You haven't got a letter on yours. I suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We know we're called Gred and Forge." And I just thought that was so funny. Like, like, it's so stupid, but like they just do that all the time. They just make those stupid one-liners. And I think, like, especially reading that as a kid, having like that dumb humor, I was like, I like that a lot. And so I feel like that influenced me a lot. But the toilet one is great too. There's just so many good lines. Yeah, there's so many good lines, like Dumbledore's socks and everything, talking about like that's his greatest desire.
Mm-hmm. Dude, speaking of Friend George, though, another great line that's in both the movies and the books, movie and book, is right before they go through the pillar at King's Cross Station for platform 9 3/4, and they like try and confuse their mom
Yeah.
on who they are, and then they're just like, honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother. I think that one's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm only joking. I am Fred. Like, I would kill
Yeah.
that kid. I would kill
Yeah,
him.
dude.
Like,
You know, Mrs. Weasley has just got like the best patience
yeah.
in the entire history of time, because those kids, man.
Fun fact about Fred and George. They're named Fred and George, F and G. Molly's brothers were named Fabian and Gideon Pruitt. They were part of the First Order of the Phoenix during the First Wizarding War. They're referenced by Mad-Eye Moody when he's showing Harry the picture of the original order.
That's right.
And he talks about them and says they fought like lions, and it took 6 Death Eaters to take them down, and they did die. But when you find that out, it brings so much more weight to Molly being scared of her family getting involved with the Order again, because she lost her brothers last time. So she can only imagine, and they were gifted wizards that, went down fighting, but she can only imagine what's going to happen to her kids and things like that. So but that's the interesting sorry, words are hard. The interesting origin of the Fred and George, at least the F and the G for those names.
Because the Weasleys named, even Ron's middle name, Bilius, is that Molly's brother, or is that Arthur's brother?
They always call him Uncle Bilius, but I think he's a Weasley.
Okay.
So I think it's either I think it's their great uncle. So I think it's Arthur's uncle, because they talk about, I think he was Myrtle's husband, if you remember their Aunt Myrtle. So I think that it was her husband, because they talk about how if he was still with us and all this stuff, and and they reference how Myrtle would have tried to get him to stay quiet or whatever. But so I think that's the relation there. I hopefully we don't end on this sad note, but I want to talk about the least favorite, either adaptation, least favorite moment, least favorite line, whatever it is that when you watch this movie just doesn't click with you, doesn't mesh, whatever it is. I'll start it off. For me, Dean Thomas really bothers me, the way they handled him.
Wait, in the movie?
Yeah, in
or
the movie.
Like,
in the movie.
Oh, okay.
And I was going to talk about peeves, but Dan brought that up, and I'll let him talk about that a little bit more if he wants to. But the character of Dean Thomas, he is, for all intents and purposes, a Muggle-born. His mom's a Muggle. He has no idea who his dad is. But he was raised in the Muggle world. He's a soccer fan. There's huge moments in the book talking about how he put up these soccer posters, and like Seamus and Ron make fun of him. They're like, they don't even move around. Like, what are you doing? But in the movie, he looks over at Neville when Neville gets his Remember-All, and he goes, Neville called himself a Remember-All. Like, dude, you wouldn't know what that is. You would have no idea. Like, what are you doing? Sit down. Like, what are you... Like, I was so irritated.
So
I was so mad. I was so heated. And I was watching it with my wife, and my wife's like, you really need to calm down about this Dean Thomas thing. I'm like, no, this is important. Because for me, Dean and a lot of the students are way bigger characters in the book, in all the books, because she had more time to go into it than the movies had with a lot of those characters, which I totally get.
Right.
But Dean is a huge wrench in the plans of Harry trying to do some stuff romantically that goes on later. He ends up being part of the Quidditch team at one point. He's always been Seamus's best friend, and he's been someone that Harry can trust for a long time. And he becomes important in the 7th book as well. And I've always liked Dean and Seamus. And I think they did Seamus really, really well with the first book. Basically, all I did was blow himself up constantly. But but Dean, for me, mishandled, and that's okay. I'm being nitpicky. But when you love something as much as I do, like Harry Potter, I guess you have to be nitpicky. So
That's true.
Daniel-san.
It's hard to decide. I was thinking about one, and I think the part that has always bothered me the most in it's more prevalent in the book than it is in the movie, but it's when Hagrid takes Harry to King's Cross Station. And he's like, okay, here are your tickets. Good luck. And, like, he doesn't tell him anything. Like, would it be that hard just to say, like, oh, just walk into that pillar. Just do that. Right in between there, just do that. It's totally fine. And, like, Harry was thinking he was, like, he was getting pranked or something. Like, he was like, oh, man, this isn't true. And, like, it's so, like...
I think it'd be funny.
Like, yeah, like, and I get that that's, like, Harry Potter, or Hagrid's, like, character is, like, he's kind of forgetful sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I've heard a theory about that, about why he's forgetful. I'll talk about that in a different episode. But it just bothers me so much that, like, that's just common sense. Like, Hagrid knows better than anyone Harry was raised by Muggles because he dropped him off at the Muggles' place. He knows that there's no way Harry's gonna, in any world, anyone ever would just be like, you know what? I bet if I run into this solid-looking brick pillar, I'll find the train I'm looking for. Like, it's just so funny. I mean, without it, he never would have met Ron, and so it's necessary.
Right.
But,
it's a plot mechanic. But to go along with what you said about Hagrid should have known because of how he dropped off Harry at the Dursleys. Why is Hagrid surprised that Harry doesn't know who he is?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can you be... You literally had a whole conversation with McGonagall and Dumbledore about how these are the worst muggles imaginable. Why on earth would you think they'd just be like, hey, you're a wizard, bro? Like, no. Like, his complete and utter shock, I never... It's like,
he also just, like, knocks down that door. It's like, dude, you can knock. You know, that is a possibility.
He was trying to, Logan. Gosh.
He's just pretty swole, you know?
Really hard.
He's just
like, knock, oops.
Mr. Logan, please.
All right. This one actually came up, and it's been bothering me a lot lately. Because I listened to the first book, like, I think it was like a month ago. But Neville's involvement is not how it should be in the movies. Mm-hmm. And that drives me crazy because Neville, I mean, like Dan and also you, Brian, you both pointed at it, like, Neville's, like, really important. He's a really important character in the whole story, the whole series of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And I get, like, you know, in movies you don't have as much time to tell certain stories and stuff like that. But with how important Neville is, especially even in the first book, you know, the stuff he does in the first book really it's super important to how the story moves in that book. And so that always bothered me because there's like, specifically the one scene that bothers me most in the movie that has to do with Neville, well, technically it doesn't have anything to do with Neville, is the Dark Forest scene when they get detention and they have to go into the Dark Forest. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, oh, well, just throw Ron in there. And it's like, what? No, like, he didn't go. Like, in the book, it's specifically not Ron. It's Neville, Hermione, Draco, and Harry.
They gloss over that whole sequence with the dragon, and they get rid of it so fast. Yeah. But Ron gets bit, which is why he's in the hospital wing, which is why Neville is there, which is why he goes to detention. Like,
and then also, like, the Dark Forest scene alone, you know, what happens in the Dark Forest is super important. That's a pretty big moment for Harry. And I think, you know, you could say, like, well, then it doesn't really matter. You know, Neville doesn't play a huge part in that scene. But at the same time, you know, it plays a part in the next movie or book. And, like, you know, they mention, like, oh, Ron's never been into the Dark Forest. So, like, going into the spiders, we'll talk about later, like, that would have been way more terrifying for him. Like, he's already scared of spiders, but then he has to go into the Dark Forest for the first time.
Which he's never done,
But in the movies, it's like, oh, well, he's been in there before. I mean, it's still scary, but, you know, a little less scary. But, I mean, I just find, like, Neville's involvement in all the movies was not portrayed well. And, like, Neville's not one of my favorite characters. I think he's kind of like the Samwise Gamgee of Harry Potter. You know, technically, I would say in some way, Neville's the hero of the whole series. I don't know, personally. And that's what Sam is, but he's just kind of a background character. I mean, Sam's less of a background character, but
Right.
that's Lord of the Rings. But yeah, Neville's a cool character. He's got a cool story, a cool background, a cool connection with Harry, with the whole prophecy thing, and I just felt like they didn't cut him any slack in the movies. And
I would have
the
to
actor
agree.
grew up to be way more handsome. You know, he was a really handsome guy.
More handsome than me, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
but yeah, that's my moment, because that one just bothered me.
I could sit here and nitpick so many different things,
Right.
the whole thing that Charlie Weasley isn't even in any of the movies bothers me.
Right.
That it says that Harry's dad was a seeker when he was a chaser on the Quidditch team bothers me.
I didn't even realize
There's
that.
so many things that are just little nitpicky things. You're like, come on. But I get it because they're plot devices and things like that. And when you only have an hour and a half, you got to focus on certain things. At the end of the day, I love this movie. It grew to be an impactful movie for me, and every time I watch it, I fall back in love with Harry Potter. I can watch any of them and have a good time, but when I watch The Sorcerer's Stone again, it brings me back in completely. From not knowing about the magical world to back into it. And I wish if there was a moment that I could go and wipe my mind and live again, it'd be anything to do with Harry Potter. Just to experience it again for the first time, I think would just be fantastic. So I think this was a great dive in, guys. Do you guys have any more parting shots before we sign off on this one?
Nope.
Harry
Potter's awesome. It's great.
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is another theory. It's really short. Spoiler alert, naturally. So we know the prophecy about Harry, Voldemort, whatever, ambiguous. You knew it dealt with Voldemort, but you weren't sure if it dealt with Harry or Neville, right?
Sure.
Right.
And so one of the first scenes, actually it's probably not the first scene with Neville, one of the first scenes in the movie that you remember with Neville is when he hops on his broom, starts flying away, and he loses control, and he slams into the ground super hard, breaks his arm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Wrist.
And I was reading up on this, and the same thing happens later in the book to Harry. Professor Quirrell, Voldemort makes Professor Quirrell use his magic to attack Harry on the broom, try to get him thrown off and killed. And so the theory is that Professor Quirrell is the reason that Neville crashed his broom, because he was trying to kill him just so Voldemort could cover all of his bases.
Interesting.
Interessante.
Well, that makes Squirrel
That's a good theory.
pretty much the worst villain ever.
He is the worst villain.
Did you know he's a Ravenclaw? He's the only villain Ravenclaw in the continuity of Harry Potter.
Did you know he's a
Really?
loser?
Yeah.
I did know that, yeah.
He's a failure.
You never see, even in the books, they don't even go into Defense Against the Dark Arts. Kind of weird.
No.
But
They just, have this weird, in the movies when McGonagall goes to get Oliver Wood from that class,
And it's, not the right
you just
class.
hear, you hear, that dinosaur sound in the background, and you're like, what are they studying?
He's
And
holding
he
an
has, a
iguana.
lizard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I enjoyed the topic. I enjoyed the back and forth. I think we covered some interesting theories. We talked about the highs and lows of this movie, and I'm excited for the series to come. For those listeners, do look for the next episodes. It'll be fun. We're going to go into every single book and movie like we said before. So if there's one in particular that you really like, just tune in, and hopefully we cover the topic you want to hear about. But if nothing else, gentlemen, I think we're going to sign off.
Yep. Just check it
I
out.
agree.
Check us out on Spotify. We're also on YouTube. And then also on the site Anchor. That's a good one. And then right now we're working on getting it onto Apple Podcasts, so you can check us out on there.
It's a
but
process.
suggestions are always welcome as well. So if you have suggestions on how to be better, how we can improve, what things to talk about, anything like that, throw it in. Probably the best places right now is a YouTube comment on the video. That would really be helpful.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Council of Nerds.